What are variables? What is the difference between var, let and const keywords? Very important question. The simplest definition of a variable is variables are used to store or hold data. For example, here 10 is the data or value and we used the var keyword to store it. Similarly, other than var, we can also use the let and const keyword to store the data. The scope of var variable is inside the whole function, whereas the scope of let and const variable is inside the block only, like an if block, a while loop block, etc. Now let me show you the differences between them with the help of the code. Here is the code example for the var keyword. Here we have one function example, and inside that we have an if condition that is always true. Inside it, we are using the var keyword to assign the count a number value of 10. When we print the count inside the if block, the output will be 10, which is expected. But when we print the count even outside the if block, even there outside, it will print 10 as the output like this. The point is, var creates a function scoped variable, meaning that even though you defined the variable var inside the if block, it is still available outside the if block because it is a function scoped and not block scoped. And in the programming world, block scoped variables are considered a better way because they give clarity about the life of the variable. Therefore, as a solution, the better way of defining the variable is now using the let keyword. Here is the same code, just I replaced this var count variable with the let keyword. Now this let variable will work only inside the if block. And if you try to access this variable outside the if block, then you will get the error count is not defined error. So the reason is, let's create a block scoped variable, not a function scoped variable, okay? Therefore, the variable will be available inside the same block in which it is defined inside the curly braces. This keyword let is more popular because it will not create confusion about the scope of the variable. Alright, the next keyword is the const keyword, which purpose is slightly different from the var and let keywords. Here in the code, you can see we assigned const z equal to 10, and then we are trying to assign a new value to z. But then our program will throw an error while logging. The reason is const can be assigned only once, and its value cannot be changed afterwards. Therefore, use const when you do not want to change the value of a variable after the first assignment, okay? Its use is different from the let and var keywords. Great, now you know all the differences between these three keywords. And like your favorite movie or song, you are not going to forget this ever. What are the types of conditional statements in JavaScript? Very important question in the history of any programming language. We know conditions. If condition 1 is true, they do this. But if it is false, do something else or run another condition. Something like this, right? New conditions can be handled in different ways in programming. And here are the types of conditional statements. You can use any one to evaluate conditions in your applications. First, the most important and the most common one is if-else statement. Here is the code example. In this example, we have a variable x equal to 5. Then with the help of this if condition, we are checking that x is greater than 10 or not. In this case, as x equal to 5, so this condition is false. And the execution will not go inside the if block. Then it will go to the else if condition and check if the x is lesser than 5, which is again not true. So finally, in this case, it will go to the else condition and it will print 3 as the output. This we call if-else condition. The second type of conditional statement in JavaScript is the ternary operator. Here we have a variable y equal to 20. Now we will create a new variable z or z, which will first check whether y is greater than 10. So this is a condition. In this y equal to, this case y equal to 20. So the condition is true. And if the condition is true, then the first value just after this question mark will be the result. Right now it is 1 here. But suppose y is equal to 5. Then 5 is greater than 10 will be false. This condition will be false. And in that case, the value next to this colon symbol, which is 0, will be the final value of the z. That is a ternary operator. Then the third type of the condition is the switch statement. Here you can see we have a variable a equal to 5. Now inside the switch statement, we will accept the a variable value like this and will check it case by case. If a is equal to 1, which it is not, right? Therefore, it will not execute this case code. Then the next case is true because a equal to 5, which is true. Therefore, execution will go inside this case and print 2 on the console. Then this break statement will exit the code from the switch statement. Listen carefully. If we do not put the break keyword here, then this next case or the default statement will also be executed. And in that case, the output will be 2 and then 3 also. So that's it. And yes, here the last default will be executed when none of the above case statements are true or fulfilled. That is the difference between these three types of conditional statements in JavaScript. What is error handling in JavaScript? Very important concept in JavaScript. Suppose you have a piece of code in your JavaScript program. Here you know this variable is not defined and it will definitely give some error. Now you want to handle and manage that error. Or you can say you want to show a proper error message and log the error in the console or the logs properly. For that purpose, we use error handling in JavaScript. First, we use the try block. If any error occurs inside this try block, then that error will be caught or passed in the catch block. And here you can log or handle the error. In this case, the output will be something like this. Here is the flow of error handling. It will start from executing the try block. If any error occurs, then it will ignore the rest of the try block and execute the catch block. And if no error occurs, then it will ignore the catch block. Simple. So what is error handling? Error handling is the process of managing errors. Now you will remember this like a story. What is the difference between spread and rest operator in JavaScript? Today I will clear the confusion between spread and rest operators which look same, 3 dots, right? Let's first explore the spread operator. Here is the code. The spread operator is denoted by these 3 dots. Here you can see one array and then we are using the spread operator to expand the array to individual elements 1, 2 and 3. So here the output is a list of individual elements, not an array. The definition of spread operator is the spread operator is used to expand or spread elements from the iterable into individual elements. So iterable means array, string which can be spread into individual elements. Now we can use the spread operator for 3 purposes basically. The first purpose is for copying an array. So in the code you can see we are using the spread operator to breaking the original array into individual elements. And since this is inside square brackets, therefore these elements will be converted back into an array, which is assigned to the variable copied array then. The next use of spread operator is merging arrays. Here you can see how we have 2 arrays and how we are putting both of them inside the square brackets with spread operators. And finally, we are getting the merged array, right? The last use of a spread operator is passing the multiple arguments to a function. Suppose you have an array with multiple elements like this. Then while calling the function, you can pass this array with the spread operator. And in the function body, you can receive the individual elements sent by this spread operator. Okay. So this is the whole story about the spread operator, where we are just spreading the a single array to multiple individual elements. And mostly in most cases we use spread operators, but sometimes in very few cases we also use rest operators. Okay, so let's quickly explore all them also. uh, Here you can see we are calling a function display with few arguments here. Now in function body we can receive the argument in a partial way. Partial means here you can see the first and second parameters represent 1 and 2, and this parameter rest arguments with these three dots will be considered as the rest of the arguments 3 4 5. Okay, these are the rest of the arguments, right? Okay, so that's why its name is also rest operator, because it represents the rest of the arguments which are left. Finally, the definition of rest of operator is: the rest operator is used in function parameters to collect all remaining arguments in an array. Remember, it gives the rest of the arguments in an array. So that's the whole story. I think now the difference is very much clear to you now. And one is to spread the array into individual element, and the other rest is for represent the rest of the elements. What are arrays in JavaScript? How to get, add and remove elements from arrays? Very basic and important question. Here is a simple array holding the array elements, and below is the index of the elements by which we can access those elements, right? And like this code, we can declare an array in JavaScript. Here, fruits is an array data type, and it contains multiple elements inside it like apples, bananas, oranges, etc. So the definition of array is: an array is a data type that allows you to store multiple values in a single variable. Now the question is, why do we need arrays? In our projects or applications, we have a lot of data. And without arrays, that data will look something like this: unstructured data. Here, different data is stored in different variables, and it is very difficult to maintain this. But we can structure this unstructured data with the help of arrays like this. Here, different types of data will be in very few arrays, which is also very easy to maintain. So that is the advantage of arrays, to structure the data in a better way. The next part is how to get, add and remove elements from an array. And here is a list of the methods of the arrays to do all these operations. Get methods are there to get any specific or particular element of any array. Add methods are used to add more elements to an array. Remove methods are used to remove or delete elements from an array. Then modify methods are used to modify the elements of the array. For example, if you change the spelling of apple element by using the array modify methods, right? Then there is a list of other methods also that can be used for different purposes. I will discuss all these methods in one by one in upcoming questions, but here is a quick summary of some important methods. The push method is used to add given elements at the end of the array. The unshift method is used to add the given element at the start of the array. Then the pop method is used to remove the last element of the array. Shift method is used to remove the first element of the array. Then we have the filter method, which is used to filter the array based on the condition. The map method is used to modify each element of the array. And the concat method is used to add arrays into single array. Great. Now you know what is an array, why we need it, and what are the some of the important methods of it, right? What is array destructuring in JavaScript? Good question. If you remember, when our application had lots of unstructured data that could take multiple and different type of variables to store, right, without arrays, then what we do? We use arrays to structure the data, which is a very good practice, right? But sometimes we have to destructure the array data back into the variables, and that is called destructuring. The definition is array destructuring allows you to extract elements from an array and assign them to the individual variables in a single statement. The second point is array destructuring is introduced in ECMAScript 6 ES6. Let's see the code how to do it in code. Suppose we have an array of fruits like this. Now destructuring means assigning this fruit array to a constant like this. This assignment will assign each element of the fruit array to these individual variables. First fruit, second fruit, and third fruit. Now the question is, what is the benefit of doing all this? So basically when you do this, you can get individual elements of the array by using individual variables directly. See, the values of variables are now the individual elements of the arrays. Alright, now I think you got it. What is the array destructuring in JavaScript? What are functions in JavaScript? What are the types of functions? Very basic and very important question. Let's first see a simple JavaScript function code and the parts of it. Here is a simple function. First, we declare the functions by using the function keyword. After that, we put in the function name, and then inside the round brackets, we put the list of parameters. Now inside the curly braces, we put the function body, and our function is ready. Then we call the function by passing the arguments list which should match the parameters list. And finally we get the result like this. So that is the structure of a normal function in JavaScript. The definition of function is a function is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. Now in JavaScript we have many types of function, and here is the list of functions. Named functions, anonymous functions, function expressions, arrow functions, IIFE, callback functions, and high order functions. In upcoming questions, we will compare each and every function, all of them, like the differences between them we will see, and when to use which functions in real world applications, that also we will see. What is the difference between named and anonymous functions? When to use what in applications? You already know about named functions. Here is the code, and this is the most basic type of function. The definition is named function have a name identifier. So we have this sum as the name of the function, and that's why we call them named functions. On the other hand, we have anonymous functions in JavaScript, like this one inside the console log. Here we have one function, but it does not have any name. That's why we call it anonymous functions. Anonymous means without name, okay? Here the anonymous function is accepting the parameters a and b. And from here we are passing the values 4 and 5 for these two parameters a and b. And finally we are getting 20 as the output. The definition of anonymous function is anonymous function do not have name identifiers and cannot be referenced or called directly by the name like we can call named functions, right? Now the question is when to use what in our applications. The answer is use named functions for big and complex logics, okay? Or use it when you want to reuse one function at multiple places. On the other hand, use anonymous functions for small and simple logic. Use it when you want to use a function at a single place only. So that is the difference, and that is the purpose of the named and the anonymous functions. What is a function expression in JavaScript? Here is the code, and you can see here that we have one anonymous function, and we have assigned this anonymous function to a variable. Now we can call this variable a method, something like this, and it will give the expected output of 8. So this is an anonymous function expression because we have used an anonymous function and assigned it to a variable. So what is what is function expression? A function expression is a way to define a function by assigning it to a variable. Now there is one another type of function expression, and that is named function expression like this. Here you can see we have one named function sum, and we are assigning this named function to the add variable, then calling the add variable in the same way. But this approach is not giving any benefit because you can directly use the function name sum to call it, right? So mostly function expressions are used with the anonymous functions only. I hope it's clear now. What are arrow functions in JavaScript? What is its use? Nowadays, arrow functions are very important part of any programming language. It is used everywhere in JavaScript applications. And arrow function is just a shortcut way of writing the normal functions. Like in normal functions, we have a parameter list and a function body, right? Similarly, in arrow functions, we have round brackets, arrow operator, and curly braces. So inside the round bracket, we will put the parameter list, and inside the curly braces, we put the function body. So simple, right? So for example, suppose we have a normal function code where we have an add function like this. And then we call the function add like this by passing the parameters. Now the same thing can be done by using arrow functions also. See here, you can declare one add variable, and then after equal inside the brackets, you can pass the parameters x and y. In normal functions also we pass parameters, right? In arrow function we pass like this. If you do not have any parameters, then leave this brackets empty. Now after this arrow operator, we can write the code statement or the logic which we normally write inside the curly braces of normal functions. Great. Now compare this one line code with the previous one, which was the traditional function approach. We have removed 4 lines of code in a single line, right? So the arrow function will make the code shorter and simpler. Even in this case, you do not have to write this return keyword with the arrow function. Arrow function will automatically understand that, okay? So finally, the definition of the arrow function is arrow functions, also known as fat arrow functions, are a simpler and shorter way of defining functions in JavaScript. That's it. Now I think this concept is permanently fixed in your memory. What are callback functions? What is its use? Again, a very important question. Here is the code. And you can see we have simple normal function add here. Now we can call this add function by passing 2 parameters and then getting the result in the result variable, right? Here the names of the parameters are not necessarily the same as the name of the parameters in the actual method. At the end, we are logging and displaying the result. But in real application, instead of this one line console log statement, we can have many lines of code to display the result, right? Then better we put all those lines of code in a single method display like this and call it like this. And here we will put the complete code of the display method. Here you already know x and y, they are the parameter. But what is the operation here? Yes, the operation is the callback method only. When we were calling display method, then we were passing this add function as the parameter here, which we are receiving in the operation here. So finally, the definition of the callback function is a callback function is a function that is passed as an argument to another function. I hope you got it right. One more thing. This display function, which is receiving a callback function as a parameter, is called a higher order function. Now the question why we did all this, what is the advantage of using this callback function and higher order function? This is the question now. The benefit is that if you have more methods like add, multiply, subtract, divide, etc. like this, then you can pass them all like this inside the display method as a callback and it will work perfectly. Another benefit is all the display code will be inside a single function. As a result, the code will look more cleaner and more structured, right? In big applications where functions are large and complex, these kind of things are very helpful. So that is the importance of the callback functions. What is a higher order function in JavaScript? All right, we already know the callback functions. Now we call a function higher order function if two things. If it takes one or more functions as arguments, or it returns a function as a result. Let's focus on the first case. See, we have one function HOF which is accepting func as a parameter. So basically a callback function as the parameter. So a function which accepts one or more callback function is a higher order function. This is the first time and I hope you already know that. Now the second type of higher order functions which returns a function as a result. See this function, the create adder function is a higher order function here because inside it we are returning the result of this function, which is just adding the value of the value and the number. And this function is anonymous, but it can be named a function as well. That is not a problem. So when a function returning a function as a result is also a higher order function. Now the question is how you will use this create adder higher order function. So using it is a two-step process. The first step is to pass the parameter 5 in the create added method and get the result function in the add 5 variable. Okay, so then use this add 5 variable as a function and pass 2 as the parameter. Okay, so something, we are using function expression here, getting the result of the function in the variable and returning it. So now thereafter the internal anonymous function will accept this value 2 here. Okay, and the create adder function will accept 5 as the number parameter. Now you have both the value and number parameters with you, and finally you will receive the output is 7. Great. This second higher order function, this second type is not so popular, but yes, it is also the higher order function only. What are pure and impure functions in JavaScript? You know the meaning of pure and impure, right? For example, this is a normal add function. When we call this function with some arguments, it will give this output. Now, even if we call this function 100 times with the same arguments, every time it is going to give the same output. The definition of the pure function is a pure function is a function that always produces the same output for the same input. Now let's see the impure functions. Here you can see we have a total variable outside the function, and this add to total function is adding some value from the parameter with this total variable. Now when we call this function like this, the output will be total plus 5, and total is 0, so 0 plus 5 equal to 5, right? Now the total variable value equal to 5. But here is the twist. If we call the same function again with the same parameter 5, this time the output will not be the same. The parameter value is the same as 5, you can see, but because total is a global scope variable, it has maintained its last state, okay, and its value was is 5 from the past action. Yes, therefore now total equal to total plus 5, which means total equal to 5 plus 5 equal to 10, and the output is different this time. So this is an impure function. The definition of an impure function is an impure function can produce different outputs for the same input. So there are two more differences between them which we just noticed. First, pure functions cannot modify the state, right? But impure function can modify the state. Like we modified the state of the total variable, right? The next difference is pure functions cannot have side effects, whereas impure function can have side effects. What are side effects? Side effects are like Any external changes made by the function are a side effect. For example, in this example, the impure function add to total method, the external variable total value has been modified to something else. So this is like a side effect of executing this add to total function. So basically we are executing a function, but it is modifying something which is external to it. This total variable was external, so that was like a side effect. Okay, so great. Now I think you can explain this to anyone. What are template literals and string interpolation in strings? Very important question. And if you see this image, a template literal is a combination of a template, which is a placeholder for a variable whose value is assigned at runtime, and a literal, which means a fixed word or sentence. Let's see the code now. Here is the code where first we have a normal string with the value happy, and then like this we are putting a statement inside the backticks. This statement inside the backticks is a template literal. Okay. Now template literals use the string interpolation concept. As per string interpolation, the string inside the curly braces and preceded by the dollar sign will be considered as a variable, and the value of this variable will be evaluated at runtime. So the final output of this template literal is hello happy. Also, template literals can be used to store multi-line strings like this. Great. Finally, the definition of the template literal is: a template literal, also known as template string, is a feature introduced in ECMAScript 2015 ES6 for string interpolation and multi-line strings in JavaScript. That's it. What are objects in JavaScript? First of all, in general, what is an object? We know variables, arrays, a string, but object is something different. Object is a real world entity. For example, in programming world, animal is an object, car is an object, and similarly, a person can be an object also. Now an object can have properties like hair, eyes, skin. Also, an object can have actions or functions like eat, sleep, walk, right? Now in JavaScript, the same person object can be coded like this. Here we have the person object, and inside the curly braces we can define the properties of this object. Basically, key value pairs. Here the name property is assigned a string value, and not just a string, we can also assign an array as a value for a property. And this greet property can be assigned an anonymous function as well, because an object can have functions as well. Okay. And here is the list of the types you can assign to the properties of an object: string, numbers, arrays, functions. Also, you can assign child object to the parent object. We call them what? Nested objects. Now, if we want to access these properties, so first we can access the name property like this person.name. Then we can access the hobbies or by the index value on the array hobbies, and we will get the value at that particular index. Then we can also use the object to call the method greet, something like this, which will basically execute the greet method. Great. Finally, the definition is: an object is a data type that allows you to store key value pairs. Simple. What is the difference between an array and an object? Let's see the code first. Here you can see the code of an array, and here is the code of an object. Now let's see the differences. First, arrays are collection of values. So all these elements in the array are values and nothing else. Whereas an object is a collection of key value pairs, right? The second difference is that arrays are denoted by square brackets. That is the syntax of an array. Whereas objects are denoted by curly braces like this. The third difference is that elements in an array are ordered. Okay. What that means is array are indexed, right? 0, 1, 2, 3 in sequence, right? whereas properties in objects are not ordered. Now you know and understand the differences between the array and the object. How to add, modify or delete properties of an object. For example, like this, we have a blank object. Now, in order to add properties to this object, we can use the dot notation like person.name equal to happy. Also, to modify the properties, we can use the same dot notation. Okay, so it will basically override the previous property value. And finally, if you want to delete some property, you can use the delete keyword like person.property name to delete the property from the object. So that is the simple answer of this question. What are classes in JavaScript? Classes are more popular in server-side languages like Java and C Sharp. But because they provide so many benefits, so their usage is increasing in front-end technologies also like JavaScript nowadays. The reason is that classes give object-oriented structured code, which is a very good for very large and enterprise level big applications. Okay, let's see the code. Here you can see a piece of code where person is a class, and inside that we have a constructor and a function. Now the question is, how do we use this class? For that we have to create the object from this class like this. Here you can see we are using the new keyword with the class name person and passing two parameters name and age. Here this object creation code will invoke the class constructor method automatically, and the constructor will receive this age and name as the parameters. Then the constructor will set the properties of this person object here, name and age. And finally, the object of person class is created, which is then assigned to the variable person1. The same will happen with the second object also. So now in our JavaScript applications, we have two objects. One is person1, another is person2. And we can access the properties of the object something like this, person.name. And even we can call the methods of the class by object.method name. And we will get the expected output. Now you will ask, what is the benefit of this class, right? Why can't we directly create this person object, right? Good question. And the benefit is reusability. So you can create this class at one place, and then you can create multiple objects of this class anywhere in your application. For example, you can create multiple objects of this person class like happy, Anurag, multiple person, man, woman, multiple objects, right? Finally, the definition of classes. Classes serves as the blueprint for creating the objects and define their structure and behavior, right? And here are some advantages of classes. The first obvious one is that classes are used for object creation. The second benefit is classes follow object-oriented principles which provide encapsulation, which then provide the data safety. Then object-oriented programming also provides inheritance, which what inheritance provide? It provides reusability. Another benefit of object-oriented programming is polymorphism and abstraction. So that is a very deep level discussion, but maybe I will cover this in some separate question. What is a constructor? Here is the code of a simple class person, and inside this we can see the constructor keyword, right? The constructor is nothing but a function. Remember, it's just a function of the class that is invoked automatically whenever you create any object of this person class. And then the logic inside the constructor will be executed. So if you want some code to be executed automatically whenever an object of this class is created, then simply put that logic or code inside the constructor, okay? Finally, the definition is, constructors are special methods within the class that are automatically called when an object is created of the class using the new keyword. That's it. What is the use of this keyword? The definition is, this keyword provides a way to access the current object or class. For example, suppose you have a class like this. Now inside The see the constructor having this dot name equal to name. Here, name is the value you are getting from the parameter name. Okay, and this dot name, what it is? It is referring to the property of the person class. So basically, we use this keyword here to represent the class which name is person. So see the definition again. This keyword provides a way to access the current object or the class. And here we are accessing the class. Similarly, in the constructor function, you can also use this keyword with the property names like this. Now the question is, what is the benefit of using this keyword here? The benefit is, for example, if you do not use this keyword here with this class person, okay, then tell me how will you differentiate which one is the parameter and which one is the property of the class? So you cannot differentiate then, right? That will create the confusion. So same thing with the constructor function also, you cannot differentiate. So this keyword is used to represent the current object or class and to avoid any confusion. That is the answer of this question. What are the techniques for achieving asynchronous programming in JavaScript? Here are the most popular techniques to achieve asynchronous operations in JavaScript. The first one is the set timeout method. The second is the set interval method. Then callbacks, then promises are a very popular technique. Then async await is the very latest and effective technique. Then we have generations with yield and event driven programming also, and they are like quite advanced one. And do not worry, I will explain all of them in upcoming questions. What is set timeout? How it is used to handle asynchronous operations? Very important question, and you will find this method at many places in UI applications. First of all, timeout means stop. Stop right now and start after 10 minutes, 10 seconds, or after some time. That is set timeout. Here is the code. We have this console log statement at the starting point of the program. Then we are putting the set timeout method like this, inside which we are calling one anonymous function as the first parameter. And then second parameter of the set timeout method is the time after which this anonymous function will start executing. Okay, so that is set timeout function, which sets a task or function to execute after some time. And then at the end we have this non-blocking printing. Now how will this be executed? First the statement will be executed, then the set timeout method will execute this anonymous function after 3 seconds. But this set timeout function will not block the execution of the next line of the code for 3 seconds. Okay, so if you see the output here, after the first line of code, the not blocked last statement is executed because set timeout did not block it. And then after the 3 seconds, the anonymous function of the set timeout method will be executed. So this line will be at the last statement of the output. You got it right. Finally, the definition is set timeout is a built-in JavaScript function that allows you to schedule the execution of a function after a specified delay or time asynchronously. Okay, after some delay and asynchronously. Here asynchronously means executing parallelly and in a non-blocking way. Great, I think now you can set timeout for the interviews. What is set interval? How is it used to handle asynchronous operations? We already know the set timeout, which will start executing the function after a delay, right? Similarly, set interval also starts executing the function after a delay only, but it will keep repeating the function after the same delay. Okay, that is set interval. Here is the code, very much similar to set timeout only. We just replaced the set timeout method with this set interval method here. It is also accepting two parameters. First is the function and second is the time. But the output will be different this time. See, first start, then not blocked code, because set interval is also an asynchronous operation and it will not block the next task. Okay, And then after the 3 seconds, I am not stopping anything. This line will be printed by set interval method. Now the difference is that again after 3 seconds, this anonymous function will again execute. So the set interval method will execute this anonymous method again and again after every 3 seconds. Finally, the definition is: set interval is a built-in JavaScript function that allows you to repeatedly execute a function at a specified interval asynchronously. Great, now you know it. What are promises in JavaScript? Very important question in JavaScript. Suppose you have a piece of code P1 that does some processing. Now, if you will apply promise to this process P1, then promise will make sure to give back some result. Okay, either the result is completed, fulfilled, or resolved, or the result is an error. So basically, to ensure that we get some result from the code, we use promises with the code. Okay. Now here is the pseudocode of promise. The first thing that happens inside a promise is an asynchronous operation with the help of the set timeout or set interval asynchronous methods. Okay. Then you can see that promises are created with the help of this promise constructor, and it is accepting two parameters, resolve and reject, which are basically callback functions only. Now the question is, where is the declaration or the body of these resolve and reject functions? The answer is that resolve and reject are inbuilt functions provided by the JavaScript engine only. You do not have to write any declarations for them. Okay. After the synchronous code, if your promise operation is successful, then it will call the resolve function. And if it fails, then it will call the reject function. These are the some basic steps to set up a promise. Okay. Let's conclude some points about promises. Promises in JavaScript are a way to handle asynchronous operation. That is their first promise. Then a promise can be in one of the three states: pending, resolved, or rejected. No other state. So when the promise is running or executing, it is in a pending state. After getting the result, it will be either resolved or rejected state. Okay, the last point about promises is a promise represents a value that may not be available yet, but will be available at some time in the future. It means when you make a promise, it will take some time to execute, but in the future means like 3 to 5 seconds or not 3 to 4 years. Okay. So in the future, you will surely get the value or the result, either success, failure, with some reason. Okay. That is the promise. And that is the high level idea about the promise, which you should promise me to never forget. Okay. In the next question, I will show you the implementation of promise. How to implement promises in JavaScript. Here you have to remember 4 things. First, you have to use the promise constructor or to execute an asynchronous function. Then you have to use resolve and then method to settle the success response. Or you have to use the reject and catch method to settle the error response. Okay. In the code, first we have a myPromise constant that gets the result from the promise constructor. And now inside the promise, we are using the set timeout to make our operation asynchronous. Okay. After 1000 milliseconds, the code inside it would be executed. Here we are generating a random number between 0 to 9. Now, if the number generated is less than 5, we mark it as a success and call the resolve callback function like this. And if random number is greater than 5, then we consider it as a failure and call the reject callback like this. In real applications, we put the API calling basically inside this. So our promise is now ready to run asynchronous operations. Now the question is how to run this promise and how to handle resolve and reject cases. For handling resolve and success case, we call then function of promise myPromise like this and pass the result of the resolve function as the parameter here. So inside this, you can print the result, or in the case of an API response, you can retrieve the data here basically. But if it is a failure or reject case, then my promise will use its catch function like this to manage the error. And here again, we will pass the result of the reject function as the parameter. So you can see then inside we are logging the error message of failure, right? Here is the output. Since I used the random number method, sometimes the value will be less than 5 and sometimes it will be greater than 5. So sometimes the result sent from the resolve method will be logged as success, and sometimes the result sent from the reject method will be logged as error. Every time you reload this page, the result will be different. This is the simple implementation of the promises. When should I use when to use promises in real application? All right, here are the cases when you can use promises in your applications. For API calls, file handling, data fetching, animations and visual effects, and event handling. In short, wherever you want to manage asynchronous operations, you can use promises there. The point is, promises are useful when you need to perform time-consuming operation in an asynchronous manner and later handle the results when they are available. Because as the name suggests, promise will not give you data immediately, but it promises you to give the result after some time, definitely. What is the purpose of async await? Compare it with promises. Very important question nowadays. First thing first, we must have a basic understanding of promises before learning async await. Because async await internally uses some of the basic promises things. For example, here in this diagram, you can see how async await is using the promise constructor and resolve reject function of the promises. So what they are not using is then and catch function of the promises to handle the result of or response of the promise, right? Instead, they will be using the try and catch block for handling the result. So that is the difference. Now let's see the code. Suppose we have a function to fetch data. This function is returning a promise after getting the data. And then we are using the asynchronous operation set timeout to resolve the data. Now there are two ways to call this promise and handle the result of this promise. The first way is the normal promises way. Here, first we call the promise fetch data like this from here, and then by using then and catch function of the promises to handle the result of the resolve and reject functions, right? You already know that. Another way of calling the promise and handling the promise result is async await way like this. Here you can see a function that is marked as async. Now inside this, we are using the try block to call fetch data and the catch block to handle the result. So basically when we call this do something async function, the code inside it will run asynchronously and will not block anything. Then inside here, we will use the await keyword for fetch data. The reason for using await is because we want to wait for the result here, right? Otherwise, how can you log the result, right? If you will not put the await here, both the result and logging the result line code will run parallelly and concurrently, and that will cause the problem, right? So that's how async and await work together. Okay. See, asynchronous operations are happening inside the promise constructor of the fetch data method here. But while consuming the result, then both promise then and async await will wait for the result. And then only console log result will execute, right? Then try catch of async await will handle errors similar to then and catch function of promises. Both of these promises and async await will do the same thing. But as you can see, this async await of handling asynchronous operation is very similar and familiar to normal code to other programming languages similar, right? very readable, and it is in sequence. That's why nowadays it is more popular in comparison to the whole promises, the then and catch. So as compared to that. Now here are some similarities and differences between promises and async await. The similarity is promises and async await can achieve the same goal of handling asynchronous operations. The difference is async await provides a more concise and readable syntax that resembles something like synchronous code only. So, whereas promises use a chaining syntax with the then and catch, which is not that readable. Okay. The last point is async await still relies on promises to handle the asynchronous nature of the code. Okay. Great. Now you have a good understanding of async and await. Explain the use of the async and await keywords in JavaScript. It is very important to know the role of the async and await keywords in JavaScript. Okay. So here is the code where one function delay accepts millisecond time as a parameter and then returning a promise which is printing this running statement inside the code by the set timeout asynchronous function. Now let's see the async await code. Here is an async function greet. The role of this async keyword is to make the whole method run asynchronously. Okay, what it means is when I will execute this, here is the output then. Then the starting will be printed. Then this delay function will be called with the 2000 milliseconds as a parameter. Now, because this is an async method, this delay function will not block the code and therefore not blocked will be executed. In the output, you can see that after the start, not block is printed. This is the benefit of the async keyword. It will make your complete method asynchronous. Now the point is, what is the role of the await keyword here? Okay, after printing not blocked, here you can see the await delay function call again. Now this await keyword is required to block the code until this delay method is completed. Okay, so it might be that this delay method is getting some data which is very important, and that data we might have to print later. That's why, listen carefully, we intentionally use await keyword to block or to wait for the response of the delay method. Now in the output, you will see this running statement from inside the delay method. And only then after this block will it be printed. And in the output, the last statement running is coming from the above delay call of 2 seconds, which was asynchronous and not blocker, right? Because it did not block anything, that's why we completed after it's completed after 2 seconds, which is at the end now. Finally, the definition of async and await keyword is the async keyword is used to define a function as an asynchronous function, which means the code inside the async function will not block the execution of the code of other code. But at some points inside the async method, we want the executions to be in a synchronous manner only. Therefore, at those points, we need await keywords. The await keyword is used within an async function to pause the execution of the function until a promise is resolved or rejected. So that is the whole story about the two brothers whose name are async and await. Can we use the async keyword without the await keyword and vice versa? If you see this code, then yes, async without await is possible. Here you can see we have the async keyword, but we do not have the await. And it will give you the proper output like this at the end. The answer is yes, we can use the async keyword without the await keyword. But if you see this code, then if you try await without async, you will get the error. So await keyword cannot be used without async. That is like a parent-child relationship. Parent can exist without child, but vice versa is not possible, right? How do you handle errors in async and await functions? You already know the answer. Let's just revise it. Here you can see the function process data which uses async await, and you can see the try catch block inside it. Then you can see the body of the fetch data function. Again, we are using the try catch and throw statements here. So the answer is simple. In async await function, we can handle errors using the try catch blocks.